Absolutely honoured to be joined today by two superstars that I had the pleasure of meeting on the other side of the pond, who are experiencing some wonderful snow right now. It's almost ski season. We're praying for snow for Riley, and of course, we're praying for snow here for that long fabled white Christmas. But we're not here to talk about that. We're obviously edging towards the end of the calendar year, and one thing which we're really thinking about is talent acquisition's role within the broader business ecosystem and how you're able to drive value, which is what we've been focusing on over the past few episodes on the show. And today we're going to be speaking very much around brand and employer brand and recruitment marketing and how that truly impacts the bottom line of the business and what the C-suite genuinely care about when you're thinking about that outreach and that messaging. And it's not impressions and clicks, shocker and spoiler alert there for you. But let's get into it. And I really want to kind of give people who haven't had the pleasure of meeting you both a bit of an intro, your background, and we learn a lot from marketing more broadly when we think about employer brand and recruitment marketing. And Riley, that was the world that you started in. Would love to get your background, your story, just a little intro into yourself.
Absolutely. Hello, everyone. My name is Riley Stefano. I like to say that I'm one of the lucky few that grew up in the employer brand space. So I've been in this realm for the past decade now, helping kind of hyper-tech growth companies like HubSpot, Datadog, and now I'm at Celonis, kind of work in that hyperscale environment, grow their employer brand from the 1,000 to the 5,000 size employee growth pattern. So it's been amazing journeys to kind of watch these companies grow from pre-IPO to that IPO journey. I'm at a company that's in that very phase right now, working at that pre-IPO, seeing if we can get to that IPO phase. So it's been amazing to see how employer brands also shifted in that narrative over this last decade, going from how do we attract great talent to how do we both attract great talent and retain great talent, something that I'm very passionate about as employer brand continues to I'm excited to see how employer brand continues to change in this next decade to come, because it's only become more pertinent as candidates also change in their behaviors of habit as AI gets introduced into this narrative. So I'm excited to see.
We're officially 2 minutes 47 seconds in, and we've hit that AI buzzer, ladies and gentlemen. For those of you that have just done your first shot of the day at home, congratulations. But yeah, we have to cover it, and we will be covering it for sure. And a great caller. And Nicole, would love to get your background, a little bit of intro into yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Nicole Brancheau, and I have also gotten to grow up in this employer brand space. And also I was doing the math this morning, just over a decade, which at the time that I got into employer brand would have just blown my mind that I would still be doing this 10 years in. I started off in a high street agency as a sourcer, calling hundreds of people a day off of read.com, right? That was where we started, and then went in-house with GE and had the opportunity to recruit there before I moved into that employer brand space as a recruitment marketing specialist, where it was events and, can we post anything that seems cohesive on LinkedIn as a recruiting team? And, someone once said video job ads and hiring manager videos, and we all went, ooh, sparkly, and we ran right at it. And now I get to work for Qualtrics within the experience management area of the world. And I've been with Qualtrics now for about 8 years, and been similar to Riley on that journey of high tech, really, really fast evolving organizations that have a demand for great talent, and keeping that talent engaged from the moment you meet them to the moment that they move on in their career has been just a massive topic for us. And trying to point to how employer brand plays a role in that and drives so much of that has been a big portion of my journey and my professional career.
Yeah, awesome. And I had the pleasure of meeting you both at RecFest, and incidentally, we had the same conversation with each one of us individually. And then I found out when we were doing the build up to this show that you both had the same conversation as well. And it all steered around brand influence, which I think is something which we talk about but haven't necessarily nailed universally how we measure and then how we think about that knock-on impact. But Nicole, I want to come to you first on brand influence, that journey, what it means within the organization, and kind of how it's evolved from some of the metrics from before.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up into a space where it was all about, your source of hire. Got to have source of hire, and that's driven thousands of recruitment teams, investment strategies for years, right? Okay, where are the most applications coming in? We're going to throw the money there, and you bet the house on the source that is providing you the best applications. And when we've talked about that, that's how we get into that cycle about, clicks and impressions and all of that. And we've spent years indexing on that. And about 2 years ago, we pulled back from that conversation internally because for us, we started to get into kind of that more high tension conversation of, well, who's responsible for the hire? Like all of our executive layers wanted to know, well, who's responsible for the hire? Because we care about the hire, we care about getting the talent in. Who did it? Who gets the credit, right? And then it became a high tension thing. And we're like, wait a minute, we're supposed to be working together. We're supposed to be TA and employer brand and, best friends forever kind of emotion. And you can't do that when you're indexing on who's responsible for that great hire that came through. And so we pulled back from this moment of, hey, source of hire, trying to prove that inbound talent and inbound applications versus, outreach was the way to go. We want, what are we really trying to prove out? What are we really trying to measure? And as we got looking at it, brand influence really came to the surface, which was that when we looked at our audiences, we could look at all these different characteristics about them, where they came from, all of that. But we could also start indexing, because of the way that our CRM and ATS worked, on what exposure points were candidates having prior to their application, and what was different for a candidate who had brand managed exposure points versus candidates who didn't. And we've seen that on LinkedIn, right? Where they talk about your audience that is, interested in your company, right? We've started to see indicators like that come into other measurements and other platforms. And when we really started to focus on that, we went, wait a minute, we can completely ring fence, because of not only our technology, but this perspective of candidates who we know have had brand influence because they are coming in from the sites where we're managing a brand messaging. We know that we've been running campaigns there, all of that. And what was really cool for us is we could see that activity separate to the moment that they applied. And we were seeing a really big difference, that they were shopping in all of these places, ending up on our career site, but they were making their applications from the same old source of hire that we'd been running after, because that made the most sense for them. Their application was there. Their PDF was there. They already had all of this information. And so we were able to shift the conversation with our executive teams from, hey, this is the place where they made an application, to, wait a minute, this is where they're spending their time shopping for us. And that moment of apply, great, a decision-making moment, yes. But it's also based on ease, like any other consumer experience, right? Like we don't, go and double down on Amazon because we're like, well, they bought it there. Well, yeah, they did. Their credit card information was in there. So picking a source to put more investment into just because they applied there suddenly became very much a lower priority for us. And so what we started to do is we were looking at, okay, candidates with that inbound traffic source, where they were coming in and touching the site. We were lucky enough with our CRM and ATS combination that we were able to kind of meld that data together and go, okay, our brand influence sources, we can get that all the way through offer accept. So we were able to go, okay, brand influence candidates at every milestone or major milestone through the recruitment process. We found that they were moving faster. We found that they had higher offer acceptance rates. We were also, looking at how they started to kind of come into the process and be more invested in us overall. Like their engagement was higher all the way through. And it's been interesting for us looking at like other opportunities to go, okay, how far does that brand influence extend into somebody's employee experience? But being able to go, hey, that is a differentiator in the characteristics of a candidate, suddenly really changed the conversation for us and changed completely how we look at the success of our employer brand program.
And I think from when you look at the time to hire metric in particular, reducing that, there's a really nice way of being able to play back the true business value of impacting that. And then equally offer accept, as you're improving that, you're then going through less processes in order to make the same number of hires. And then there's a cost attached to each one of those processes. And you can really start to unpick and unravel and then replay back that data set, which I think is a very different way to, how many candidates did we get to apply from this campaign, or does this source actually work for us, or is we're doing lots of work elsewhere and it's just easier to click that button on that source. And it sounds like you've got a great tech stack for that. Riley, you've been through a bit of a journey in terms of different companies and different stages of maturity on that setup. Obviously, one of them literally was a CRM. Do you think it's necessary for that type of measurement to have that tech stack in place? Maybe there's other hacky ways around it. Would love to get your view on this.
Yeah, I think what's so fascinating, and not every company does have a CRM. I'm in a position right now where we don't have a CRM, and I miss having a CRM, let me tell you, because it is so powerful to be able to track that brand influence. I remember having, talent communities and being able to and set up those to be able to track that influence all the way through. But when you don't have that, it's being able to look at, what do you have in your toolbox that you can bring data to your hiring managers, to ultimately your C-suite, to show them the power of the employer brand that you're building that ultimately impacts the bottom line. Sam, you just brought up things like the time to fill, the offer acceptance rate. I am a little different from Nicole, where I actually come from a bit of a marketing background. I studied marketing in school, and I started as a travel journalist for a very hot second before I joined this employer brand space. So I always like to think about data in that traditional kind of marketing funnel. And I always do this because it starts at that awareness phase, then goes to the engage, consider, and ultimately, the offer, the hire, right? And so as you're thinking about that brand influence falls into that. You have all of those layers of metrics, but at each one, you can kind of think about the different ways that you can measure things in that slightly scrappy way. One of the things that I think people shouldn't sleep on is actually employee advocacy as a way of looking at brand influence. But it's also a way of looking at brand influence through your own employees. And your employees are some of your biggest advocates, brand champions, but they're also your own candidates and customers, because they're talent that you should consistently be trying to continue attracting and retaining, right? You're trying to attract the candidates that are external. You need to be continuing to attract your candidates that are internal, your own talent, whether that's through internal mobility or just reminding them that they are great, powerful, incredible talent that you spent how long trying to influence them to come to this. Remind them why they came to that company. Make sure that they're taking advantage of the great, whether it's a free, simple, scrappy employee advocacy program that you have. We started when I was at HubSpot. I built a HubSpot Life Slack channel, and it was a very simple, just Slack channel where we started sharing stories of employees through quote cards, simple videos, whatever it was. And we just shared stories, added people to the channel, and it snowballed into this great channel where people shared their own stories. We didn't have an employee advocacy tool. We didn't pay for it. We just had a space where people could share a global culture and a community. It's really that, it's building community. And that was actually when we tracked it. We tracked how many people were joining that community. It's a softer metric, right? It's not looking at brand influence through a way of how many candidates are you bringing in, but it's how many people are you retaining in a different way of looking at brand influence over time. So it's retention of brand influence versus attraction of brand influence. But when you're building brand influence in a really positive way, you're also building pride within employees. And that's looking at retaining great talent, because that's also cost savings to a business in the same way that candidate attraction and time to fill, reducing that metric is cost savings to a business. So just different ways of looking at it, but also really strong and powerful as this employer brand journey kind of continues to evolve.
Yeah, and I think there's a great overlay there as well with people that are actively engaged with communities that you're building inside an organization, and then the retention metrics of those folks, the employee engagement scores of those individuals versus people outside of those ecosystems. And especially as we become increasingly remote, right? We're all on this stream today from a remote location. None of us are in an office environment. That's very normal. But yet, how do you create that connective tissue in between? And then what sort of sticking power does that have? And then, that kind of play back in on you touched on it as well, Nicole, for that kind of ongoing brand influence. If you've got anything that you're measuring from the internal audience, because I think this is one of the bigger trends right now in employer brands. So Nicole, have you got anything that you're measuring specifically for internals?
I mean, we're deeply invested in our EX programs. So, we run everything through our EX25 programming from a Qualtrics perspective. We've got a really robust program around it. And what that does is it allows us to look at not only overall engagement, but sense of belonging, things that are the types of sentiment that you can point to and go, okay, we have an EX program. We have all of these strategic, not only benefits, but experiences that have been designed for our employees. And how are they experiencing that in a way that makes them want to be here? And when you see that those engagement levels are up, when you're seeing that, hey, changes or this, recommunication of a program. So many of us have great programs and we just communicate them. We communicate the infrastructure, but we don't talk about the program. When you see that the recommunicating of those aspects are increasing engagement with your team, what you start to see is, oh, wait a minute, that's my EVP and it's being actually activated in my community and it's being activated and, oh, wait, they like it because that is an expression of who we are as an organization and what it is to be here. And now, oh, wait a minute, they're taking it external because they like it enough that they want to talk about it, because we're in, an era where people like to share about their experiences, the good, the bad, the in-between. And so when we have those EX programs and we look at those measurements around engagement and our manager effectiveness and, some of those big things that we point to as an organization of these are our moments where we go, are we being successful with our EX program? That gives us a really good sense on, hey, how are we performing? How are we continuing that brand influence? Like say, that continues all the way through. And when we think about that, then, kind of being that nice little cycle, are we seeing folks wanting to also take that externally? And so we've got our employee advocacy program, but beyond that, like say, we do focus on how our engagement scores and that overall program is working internally. And so we know what we need to be doing for our EX program.
Yeah. And that evangelism goes full circle, right? As you just touched on this, it's like, if you can build those communities, everything else dovetails one into the other. And so I think for folks listening, we've obviously touched on a few parts, and I want to kind of bring some bits together on and maybe build on some of the parts we've done already. But when we think about C-suite, and when we think about the business, what are the metrics that you see that matter? Riley, going to come to you first.
Absolutely. And kind of anchoring on what Nicole was just saying, something super interesting and fascinating that my team actually took over this year. We have shifted out of the talent team and we now sit within the larger people and culture space, actually within what we're now calling the culture team, within and with our people analytics, employee experience, inclusion and belonging, and employer brand team. So we're called the people and culture program office, essentially. And the data that we measure, actually our people analytics team measures everything within that employee engagement score. So a lot of those internal metrics, but we also now run all of our HR comms. So as Nicole was just saying, and something that our C-suite is now caring more and more about, is actually how communication is relating to our own internal audiences, because communication has so much power when it comes to the transparency, the trust that's being built with your employees and with that audience ultimately. So when it comes to that internal audience, the communication, and it's not just, the open rates and the click-through rates, that's the metrics that matter to us, right? But ultimately that results in retention. So the retention numbers, the attrition numbers, right? Are we actually retaining the great talent that we're spending this amount of time bringing in? Is the attrition going down, right? I mean, especially as we look at some of those audiences that are really difficult. We all know sales talent is one of those that sees the really high attrition rates. That's one that we've been paying a lot of attention to because we want to see, does this communication, more streamlined communication, actually help to, to support that in different ways. So that's just one way from an internal lens that we're looking at it. We talked a lot about the bottom line numbers of the time to fill and the offer acceptance rate. Those are those bottom line metrics that we've learned that C-suite really does care about because ultimately it's cost savings, right? They want to see like how much money are we ultimately saving the business by reducing the time it takes to hire people because it's, less time to ramp people up, less time that, customers are not being supported by someone that, they could have helping them within our products or within those spaces, less time that someone's not working on a product or on a new feature that needs to be launched, whatever that looks like. So those are the data and those bottom line metrics that really matter to them. But again, I go back to the funnel because you can't sleep on the metrics that matter to you. We can't sleep as marketers also because that's what we are at the end of the day, right? A lot of us are marketers that support talent functions. We can't sleep on the metrics that are those click-through rates, the engagement rates, the employer reputation management. Actually, believe it or not, that's one my C-suite very much cares about is our Glassdoor score. I know it's a one we love to hate and hate to love, but it's one that every candidate is still looking at. They still go to Glassdoor to say, what is our score? What are people saying about us? So we're still really actively watching it and watching what are those other new platforms that are coming out there in the world that candidates are also looking at. So no, don't sleep on some of those top of funnel metrics also, because those are indicators to you as a marketer of what and how your candidate is responding to the content that you're putting out there and how your EVP based on your candidate personas are landing with them. So what your C-suite ultimately wants to know, those bottom line metrics, it is going to differ from what you need to know as a marketer. But I would say still ultimately track that awareness, the engagement, the consideration, and the conversion metrics, because each of those parts of the funnel are ultimately important to you and ultimately to the C-suite.
Mm-hmm. Love that framing. Nicole.
I think I would echo so much of that, similar structure for us. We sit in the broader people team, not within the TA team, which has allowed us to, pursue the always on activities versus just responding to the immediate recruiting moment, right? Because we know that for us, it takes about 3 months from the initiation of a campaign, and all of the build and everything like that and activation of it to seeing a really good steady stream of talent, right? So we know those things and that structure's been helpful, and it allows us to partner also with our people analytics team. And so when we go and have those conversations with C-suite, it is, yes, here's what the analytics team is seeing from our quarterly pulses, annual survey and everything from that side, and seeing where EX program is helping to continue to engage our talent. And then we do, again, TA comes back with that time to hire and the offer acceptance rates is great indicators of how efficient and effective the TA organization is being able to be. Brand reputation is literally my bread and butter now. And so that's what I spend the majority of my time doing now for Qualtrics. And so much of it, yes, has to do with Glassdoor, but, shot glasses up, everybody. The next portion of it is how AI is really driving that brand reputation behavior, because, we've gone from a spot where, I went to, Glassdoor and I checked on Glassdoor. Now I can just ask, my local search engine, where I want to work and why, or what it's like to work at a particular organization. And all that long form content that we were told to stop doing a couple of years ago, it's back, and it's feeding the AI engines and it's feeding our reputation. And hopefully, most of us have been building it based on, the employee storytelling and employee generated content, because that's the bread and butter of what's going to build trust and engagement from the talent we want to attract. But right now, when we talk to C-suite, it's about overall reputation, where instead of just like, hey, we won this award, or hey, Glassdoor's having a minute, we're going, hey, actually, let's talk about the reputation of this organization on a broad stroke. And here are the different data points. We really try to focus on like, hey, here's your, the measurement that you care about, but here are the health metrics that we're watching and looking to influence or looking to address. That's where our work gets done. When we stack our own deliverables, it's against those health metrics, knowing that we're driving that ultimate outcome that C-suite wants to hear about it. But for us, those health metrics, not only the funnel and making sure that, hey, our campaign's actively contributing where they should be is, for us, our brand influence goal is 70% of candidates to be demonstrably brand influenced. We feel like that's sufficient. 50% is our kind of panic number. We look at those things consistently to go, hey, are the decisions that we're making about campaigns, about different pieces of programming being effective? Are they driving the health metrics that we need? Because we need those outcomes to be, these things. But that's for us, finding those health metrics of our program really shifted with looking at that outcome of driving brand influence and communicating that back up to our C-suite.
Yeah. And go on, Riley, go on. I could see you wanted to come in there, and then we'll wrap.
One other I just wanted to mention, because I forgot to add it in there, was actually internal mobility rate, or internal hiring. So we're actually re-exploring what internal mobility means, because historically we've only tracked internal hiring, but internal mobility we're realizing means so much more than just internal hires, because we think of internal hiring as, how many people are moving from team to team to team. But it's really also, if you think about internal mobility, it's how many people are you ultimately promoting each year, how many people are saying, maybe they're a leader who wants to go back to an individual contributor. Are you giving them that opportunity for growth in whatever direction they want? Because that's also creating that story of retention. So just another one to potentially explore that ultimately C-suite is going to care about, because that's another story of retention. So just wanted to throw that in there as another metric in mind.
Love that. And so I love the framing, firstly, of like our leading metrics that we control and where the work gets done. But actually, it's a bit like TA metrics, right? All of our work gets done in response rates and outreach and people that we hit and all of these things. Fine. And you can talk about the hiring funnel up until that point. But what really matters is like the impact in the business. Are we reaching the right people? Are we getting the right people in the roles, etc.? So I love that framing in. But if I was to summarize, I think like from our areas where I thought there was some really nice value in our conversations initially, which then wanted to share with people and have you share that with people here, was obviously brand influence. We were talking about that internal audience and what it means for them. I think the internal mobility piece there, absolutely critical. Brand reputation, yes. Generative engine optimization. People need to go and look right now at how they're influencing it. And I am, double clicking on blogs and long form content and written content and appearing in lots of places. The part that was a little less measurable before, that people started to turn off in favor of video. But the bit which really struck me actually from this, and I've had so many conversations with brand leaders over the years, is where employer brand sits. And in some organizations, it sits in TA. In some organizations, it sits in marketing. In some organizations, it sits elsewhere. But I think what you both touched on, which is really kind of erudite in this setup, is it enables you to be far more strategic if you are in a broader function than just responding to the here and now of talent acquisition. And it could be hard to respond to the here and now of talent acquisition with creative content versus thinking long-term about communities you want to serve. So I think, yeah, absolutely awesome to have Nicole and Riley.